Right. So, Irvin, you're first with a new kind of smartphone.
Well, actually, I've been following these people, the E Foundation, because they've been making an Android OS that's ungoogled, but they only have it available in Europe.
Oh, well, I would be interested in doing it in China because I had big trouble in China because they can't get to Google.
Yeah, so they also worked with the Fairphone. Never heard of that phone, but apparently that's a thing. But the biggest question that they've been getting is, why don't you have any US phones?
Well,
So
what do
they
they
finally, I'm sorry?
What's the OS? Is it Android?
Yeah, it's Android, but it's ungoogled.
Well, the cheapest Android phones don't meet Google's requirements, so they can't get to like Google App Store or anything. So what's the difference?
It's that you can do that kind of stuff, but on a Galaxy S9 Plus.
Okay, so it's also pro privacy and pro ethics, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, pro privacy, pro ethics, de-googled
All right.
smartphone. Yeah, but they can't yet get into the US market because they don't have the capability to port things to the Qualcomm chipset that we use here.
Oh.
And there's and also the Fairphone isn't compatible with US LTE.
So if you have a Qualcomm-based American phone, you can't just wipe it out and flash on any OS you want? This is news to me. I thought you could totally do that on Android.
Apparently you can't.
Wow.
Apparently the European chipset is the Exynos.
Oh.
How do you pronounce that?
But Qualcomm is not hackable yet.
Yeah, they can't. They're having problems trying to flash it.
Wow. Well, that seems like, regardless of this other kind of phone, that just seems like something that the Android hackers would not tolerate.
Yeah.
Okay, neat. Well, that's interesting information. And the Telia backdoor, I'm glad to see this. I was going to do this, but I replaced it by another. So let's hear about this one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step on your toes. So Telia is sort of like a cable box, DSL, internet, and TV put into one box. And it's possible to get root access on this. And it's just basically a series of failures on the parts of the developers and the hardware manufacturers. In which what they do is there's, okay, so you have that image on your screen, perfect. So the user client connects to the machine, and then the machine then logs in via SSH or logs into the server, which then grabs your Wi-Fi password, which is all stored in like plain text, and then sends it back to your router via SSH.
Wow. That's terrible. So why is your Wi-Fi password ever in the cloud anyway?
I don't know. This is so, yeah. Anyway, so there's a whole series of issues going on.
Yeah.
And so you can basically figure out and all the routers use the default username and password. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see it's tadmin, HQ, NW something. Yeah, there it is. Yep. So you can just grab the administrator password from all that. And then what you can do is you can create your own SSH server. And when your box tries to connect outwards to the Telia, it can connect to your own box. It doesn't check the public keys for the SSH. So it'll just trust that your SSH machine is the one that it's thinking it's connecting to, and you can take over the box and have a lot of fun, do some denial of service. And apparently Telia, the makers of this box, threatened the researcher, which is so funny because stuff like this, I've found weird stuff like this before, and I didn't even think like, oh God, this is just bad. Whatever. I'm not even going to like make it a CV or anything. Yep. And apparently, if you just mention this, like people get so upset.
Yep. People are famous for having like no. Well, I understand from a management point of view how it works. You're not like when this is like when the retailer Stacks or somebody there contacted me and said, "You're violating the terms of service by reverse engineering our Android app." I said, "Well, I didn't even look at the terms of service, but now that you mention it, I told Staples. That was it. I totally am." It's a problem, This stuff is all technically illegal, at least to some extent. Anyway,
I'm still not over they have the Wi-Fi password in the cloud.
Well, I know, but also, of course, they're doing stupid things with it, like people usually are when you put it in the cloud. This is pretty fabulously awful. Obviously, they designed it for some kind of convenience for supporting them or something, and without any appropriate consideration of security, which is extremely common. Most companies don't even understand how stupid they are about security. Anyway, that's a good one.
And I can tell you too, sometimes even if people are knowledgeable about security in a big company, you don't necessarily want to make a huge stink over everything until things go bad, and then you can say, okay, let's fix it now, because it's just such a, no one wants to hear about how you have to spend, a month, upgrading the servers or doing something that needs to be done.
Well, yeah, and this is why I remember when I started reporting vulnerabilities to Microsoft, my friend on the inside said, Microsoft knows of like 200 flaws in Windows, and they're not fixing them. Because there's just a lot of problems, and you can't waste all your time fixing this stuff. You have to pick the ones that matter, and you have a whole shelf of things that aren't worth the bother.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm following the news, and the thing that I thought was awesome here was the most important thing is that we need to adapt to this life. This life is not going to change. This is not going to end. There is not going to come a time when there's a vaccine and we can go back to life as normal. Just forget it. And I think the best guy that explains this is Fauci, widely respected. And he's very good at politics. I mean, he knows how to carefully say things that will not get him fired and yet still say the truth, which is extremely difficult in the Trump administration. But what he says, we're not in control. Not enough people are wearing masks. We're already over 50,000. Soon we're going to be over 100,000 cases a day. It's getting worse very fast. And the other thing he said, which I thought was extremely important, is that even when we get a vaccine, it is not going to get us back to normal. And he's one of the most significant people making this clear. The problem is not just that our government is doing everything wrong, which they are, but even after that's over, we are not going to achieve herd immunity. And this is what I often say to my Democratic friends who are saying, well, all you have to do is get rid of Trump. And I say, well, getting rid of Trump would be nice, but it's not going to fix the problem because Trump is not a cause, he is a symptom. The fact is there are a bunch of Americans that think like Trump. And even when you get rid of Trump, you still have them. That's what he says. A ton of people are going to refuse to take the vaccine. And so that means it's not going to work. A vaccine, in first place, the vaccine would have to be very effective, and that is very unlikely. And in the second place, you need to get like 90% of people to take it, and that is totally not going to happen. So we are not going to achieve herd immunity. So we all have to get used to this remote lifestyle of hiding for years. And a ton of the economy is not coming back at all. And that's what people are beginning to realize. Now, of course, the government is doing absolutely nothing. Trump is just pushing racism, holding up the Confederate statues, white power and stuff like that, because he thinks that that's what's going to get him back in, and totally ignoring it and telling people, oh, it's fine, it's just going to go away. As recently as so is Pence. But even if you think getting rid of Trump would fix it, they're putting QAnon people in Congress. There were 9, now I think there's 11 Republican QAnon people running. I don't know what's wrong with this, but anyway, so complete lunatics are going to continue to do this. And this has been a Republican Party my whole life. First, it was they ignored AIDS. They pushed racism under Nixon. It's just, that's where they are. So anyway, and the contact tracing is all crap because it doesn't fit the American freedom ethic. In other countries like South Korea, the government will actually call you and say, now you have to quarantine for 2 weeks, and people will do it. In America, they totally won't. Even in Britain, they won't. This guy's working for the Test and Trace in National Health Service, and they're paying him like $15 an hour, and he hasn't made a single call because they're too disorganized to make the calls. The American track and tracing is a shambles. And as Fauci also said, this is impossible. You have to get the number of cases down a lot before contact tracing is even possible. And so a group of party goers in New York City absolutely refused to admit to the government who was at the party. And now they're trying to give them subpoenas to force them to say, but this is just symbolic, of course. Although maybe in New York City, they've actually got the number of cases down. You have to get the number of cases down to like 100. So you can call them and find each of the 5 people, each one of those infected, and each of the 5 people, each one of those infected. And it's not an incredible astronomical number. So you can actually catch them all. And then you have to be able to make them quarantine. And, anyway, so I thought this was very interesting. And now Chicago is closing their borders the way New York City did. So That's one interesting issue. The next thing is all the permanent changes. So like Liz has talked about, college teachers are not happy at being told they have to go teach face-to-face next semester. I'm not happy with that. And so they are trying to fight for that right. A lot of colleges are trying to order all the professors to show up and teach face-to-face because they want the tuition. But the professors are fighting back, and we're going to see where that goes. I think it's not going to be a real issue because I think there's going to be a huge flood of cases before the college starts, and everybody will abandon all these plans to open up. Although a couple of days ago, City College sent us an email saying maybe we'll have to teach face-to-face after all. And so they tried to have principals meet in the South Bay, and they all got exposed to coronavirus by meeting to talk about how to open up face-to-face. So, and Muni has now said they're going to close most lines permanently, like 48 out of the 60 lines, because nobody's riding Muni. And obviously, nobody's going to ride Muni. And
permanently?
Well, yeah, they're going to be so broke. They say that they're going to completely run out of money. They would need a huge infusion of money to keep the lines running, and nobody's riding on, not only because of coronavirus, but also because all the businesses are shut. And they're trying to have an economic recovery. The business is opening, but they can't because every time they do, they just have another flood of coronavirus cases.
They already have all the train lines shut down.
Yes.
So that's crazy.
And they're trying to sanitize it. In fact, they said not only that, they're sanitizing the Muni buses, and the customers aren't happy. So they're thinking of switching to a sanitizer that smells bad so you can tell it's been cleaned, because the current sanitizers don't have an odor. So if you use bleach, so it smells like bleach, then people would feel more comfortable about getting on the bus.
Oh, yeah, because I want to get into a bus that smells like bleach.
Well, you want to get on a bus at all? You want to get on an airplane at all? Are you crazy? I'm not doing that. I mean, and the other thing is this: people think the economy's coming back. They've now scientifically proven that restaurants are the worst thing you can do. That's what I said. Going indoors for like half an hour with other people is the worst thing you can do. Like going in a classroom, going on an airplane. This is the stupidest thing you can do. Going outside, marching in the street with other people is fine outside comparatively. But they now found, because you use credit cards, they can get the data, who's been at restaurants, and then how many of them get sick later. And that's the number one correlation of you getting sick is using a credit card in a restaurant. So I thought that was very informative. And something that shocked me is I was talking to somebody quite intelligent and educated, and they said, oh, I don't know if it's really getting worse. Maybe it's getting better. And then I heard the Trump's latest lies are it's getting better. And the thing he says is, although the cases are going up, the deaths are coming down. So that means we've cured it. We don't have to worry. And this is what's called Simpson's paradox. And I was very pleased to find a nice video and everything about it. This is a statistical issue. If you combine things that are different into one pool and look at the total, you can draw completely false conclusions. So what happened is the coronavirus came in, we had a big spike in infections, then we actually shut down the nation. So the blue line is cases. We actually shut down the nation for a couple of months, like March and April, to where half the people actually stayed home. So a number of cases went down. Now, after this spike in cases, 3 or 4 weeks later, we have a spike in deaths because it takes you a while to get sick and die. Then we opened up the economy. Everybody started spreading it like crazy, and we had a huge surge in cases. So right now we're in this period where the deaths are going down, but the cases are going up because all the people that are getting sick now haven't died yet. In 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have a huge surge in deaths to match that huge surge in cases. But this brief period allows Trump and his gang of complete liars and lunatics to say we can continue to open up and have more cases because apparently cases don't lead to death. And Republicans will just follow him off the cliff like lemmings. It is amazing. This is not rocket science. This is very simple. And yet an enormous number of Americans believe this, like 30 or 40%. And I listen to people who are very frustrated about their parents who are refusing to social distance, saying everything's fine. I looked at Fox News and he said, oh, this is all just a Democratic myth to punish the president. We don't need to wear a mask. We're just going to go out to the party tonight. And like, no, don't do that.
I just dropped 2 links in the chat about that specifically. Actually, one is from the Texas Lieutenant Governor a couple days ago saying, Fauci doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. I'm not going to listen to him. I don't need to take his advice anymore. And there you have a good example of, exactly what you were talking about. And then this was the other one, which is where this ice cream shop owner had to ask customers to stop slamming the doors and yelling at these poor teenage girls that are just for wearing masks serving the ice cream, because it's become such a politicized thing that now wearing a mask means that you're anti-Trump. And one of the things that was most interesting to this to me is that it's it's not like that here, but this is what we're looking at in a lot of the country, where and it's definitely not all Republicans like that. There are a lot of governors and legislators that are like, hey, we're not signing up to catch the coronavirus. We're actually going to wear masks, and you should too. But
now the governor of Texas has issued a mask order when he was holding it back. So I think, and Mitch McConnell is wearing a mask. Yeah. And even Trump said yesterday that he might wear a mask, although I haven't seen any pictures of him doing it yet. So I think what's happening is there comes a point when the pressure gets so great that even Trump will move an inch.
Well, what's interesting is that all of the White House staffers are required to wear masks, but Trump is exempted from the rule.
Yeah. And it's the same as the old the old nobility centuries ago, where the nobility would give themselves a life of luxury and safety, and then the commoners would just be forced to go work in the horrible conditions and die because they don't matter. What's surprising is the commoners love him for it. That I had never understood, this American thing where they love leaders that are killing them. They worship them, they say this is wonderful, and they like it. That's a new thing. And I know that the French are confused. When I was in the Berkeley protest movements decades ago, they said, what the French say is, in Europe, the government is afraid of the people. And in America, the people are afraid of the government. And I don't know why, but that's the way it is. Anyway, it's just, we're going to be history books and theses and everything written about this. This is an amazing time.
Yeah.
And I was afraid this was proving that democracy is garbage and we should all have totalitarian states like China because they can protect their people better. But then there's New Zealand. New Zealand is democracy, and they did protect their people. So it can be done. There must be stupid people in New Zealand too. Somehow they don't take over.
I met someone named Ray Comfort, and he was quite stupid. And he comes from New Zealand. So I can assure you there are stupid people there.
So there must be like the equivalent of right-wingers and QAnons and Republicans.
There totally are.
Somehow they're not ruining everything the way they are over here. I don't know why. Sociologists need to study this and help us understand how could we become more like New Zealand? Because it's apparently possible to contain the damage done by the idiots in our society, and we're totally failing to do that here. Anyway, I'm very interested to watch it happen. But
I wonder if America is an anomaly, or if there are any other countries where the masks have become a politicized issue.
I don't think so. I think it's just us.
Well, I think America currently has this thing, which I think I heard Trevor Noah say, we have this worship of Trump like a god. It is all personal of Trump. Like Trump times, it offends him to see you wear a mask, and his supporters love him with a personal level. It's not a political movement. They don't have any principles. They don't believe we should balance the budget or anything. They just love Trump with an emotional connection to him. That is not normal in America. But it is normal in a lot of other countries, like dictatorships. So I think that's what they don't have in New Zealand. It's government's actually about policy. Anyway, I'll be interested to see what people make of this. Anyway, so let me get rid of these.
Speaking of being afraid of the government.
Yeah. Oh, the face recognition stuff. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I thought these two stories were pretty interesting. They're both regarding the same topic, which is facial recognition. And I thought it was, the original study was on this Comparatech. It was the other link on the Comparatech page. Yeah, this one, where they found through trying it out, the American the ACLU tried this out and did a test where they used AWS's facial recognition tool and got a whole lot of false matches from using it. So I mean, and expect more of this to come along. And surprisingly enough, surprise not surprise, it was most effective on white men's faces and least effective on people of color and women's faces, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed at how, like, for the last 4 years, everybody's pushing facial recognition like crazy. And suddenly in the last month, everybody said, oh, forget it. We're not going to sell it. IBM's not going to do it. Amazon, everyone that was doing it is suddenly pulling back. It's like everybody's been pushing AI.
So essentially, we're automating, when cops screw up and just start shaking down every black man on the street and saying you match the description of the criminal.
Yeah.
Essentially, we're just automating that process.
Yep.
Now.
Well, I mean, the AI works in sort of limited capacity. So if you have an AI program that's going to look at an image and tell you whether or not this is a bird, that I think is useful and can and should be used because it can be easily verified. You can, the computer says, oh, this image looks like a bird. You can show it to a person who can verify, yep, that's a bird. And then you can run with it. The problem with facial recognition is that it's so subtle and people can't necessarily verify that, oh, well, that if the computer says that this person is Jane Doe, well, that must be Jane Doe. Well, people don't have that level of confidence in being able to say yes or no that the computer's right or wrong. And so we get into the limitations of AI. And I think people were thinking that because it works on a limited scale, all we have to do is scale it up and we can make a ton of money. And it just does not scale up as well as people thought it would.
Yeah. And this relates directly to the story that I had, I don't know if it was a week or two ago, about the guy in Detroit who got arrested for burglarizing a shop that he didn't burglarize because the police system improperly matched his picture to a surveillance video photo, and then they arrested the wrong guy. So this is just, I feel like this is just the start of it. I think it's good that certain governments are starting to wake up and say, hey, we should really put some limits on this or ban it, but it's not nearly widespread enough yet.
Well, eyewitness testimony isn't that reliable either. So, I mean, it seems to me like this could be valuable if you don't overweight it.
Right.
It's strange to me. I've never won much for closing Pandora's box. I mean, this is just another tool that could be used correctly. One thing I was thinking about is all these studies have come out which show what I certainly observed personally watching the police in Berkeley decades ago. A lot of cops do not falsely imagine that is the right black man. They don't care. They just grab a random black man, they throw him in, they say they're all just criminals anyway, and they say, now I've solved the case and I meet my quota. They know absolutely that they're arresting the wrong man and they don't care. So in that case, AI would be better. It would actually arrest you because you do in fact look like the criminal. It wouldn't just be completely fabricated, planting evidence on you and stuff. That's why I think, there's a good side to this. If it's not overly trusted, because it won't be biased the same way humans are.
But it will be biased, though.
It will be. It's inherently biased through the algorithmic bias that's created by humans. So, I mean, essentially, I'm not seeing the difference there.
I mean, I understand Sam's point, which is that cops will indiscriminately grab, people of color off the street, and then throw them and try to blame them and plant evidence on them. Whereas a computer will only do it because of like subconscious biases.
Yeah. Also, I mean, there's the police union in California, that the police group that specifically plotted to find and kill Black Lives Matters leaders, and got caught doing it. I mean, there are conspiracies for evil purposes among the people, and I think the AI will not do that. The AI will just make an honest mistake. I believe this looks like the criminal, as opposed to having some underhanded plot. That's why I think it has a place. A correct mixture of human evidence and AI working together should be better than either one working alone.
I think the idea is that a lot of people would say intent doesn't matter. that either way you either have a person who is being racist on purpose, or you have an AI which is just being racist by its nature and doesn't control it.
Well, yeah,
And
anyway, they're working on it. So
yeah, they're working on it. Yeah,
I think
yeah. But I was gonna say I think intent does matter. I think you're right in a sense, Sam.
yeah. Anyway, I just, just banning it forever is not wise. Banning it until it gets better might make sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then we've got Duckduckgo. Yeah, I saw this. I thought this was a nothing burger. What do you think of it?
It's interesting. The second link has
this
the
one.
entire talk
Yeah.
that happened in a span of like a year, I think it was.
Yeah, so I mean, DuckDuckGo loads the favicon from their server, and therefore they know what you're doing.
Right, and this is specifically Android. This isn't
Okay.
going on the browser on your desktop browser, or I think it is for iOS too, but definitely Android, because that's where the whole thing stemmed. And it took like a year for DuckDuckGo to fix it. But yeah, the whole thing was, instead of loading the favicon from the site itself, we have one already preloaded that we just send off to you so that the site loads faster, doesn't have to go searching for it.
This is just caching, really, right?
Right, it's just caching.
So how did anybody ever think that DuckDuckGo does not know who you're searching for? How could they run the thing without knowing who you're searching for? I'm not getting it.
Right.
Obviously, your search engine company knows what you're searching for. There's no possibility of hiding it from them. I mean, unless you're behind Tor, then they wouldn't know who was searching for it.
Right.
But I know the whole point of DuckDuckGo is to push this privacy thing. But I don't, so are they going to do?
Yeah, they fixed it.
Do about it?
They fixed it. They fixed it so
How
that
can you fix it? They still know what you're searching for. How can they possibly not know what you're searching for?
So this little issue is fixed. This little issue of loading the favicons from their server instead of the actual server where you're requesting is fixed.
But how is that the problem? How is the favicon the exposure of your privacy? The search term itself is the exposure of your privacy, I would think. Maybe I'm missing something.
You know what? It was an interesting read when I was reading through the GitHub of everybody complaining that needs to get fixed, and they're taking our privacy. But you're right. It's just the favicon. Like, anybody can grab that, but okay.
I don't understand DuckDuckGo at all. I mean, how do they make any money? They have untargeted ads, right? Who in the world is going to pay for an untargeted ad in this world? You're just throwing your money away. You'd have much more return on investment for paying for a targeted ad.
I actually don't know how they're still alive.
Yeah. Anyway, I will see this. I know everyone is madder than hell at Facebook, especially, but also Google and Twitter for being tech monopolies, holding back innovation and invading everyone's privacy. But I don't think you can fix it with the free market, obviously, because you can't compete against them. The only thing you could do is break them up with antitrust, which is what Elizabeth Warren might do if she was to be the Veep, I guess. But anyway, it's interesting to see as the privacy people get mad at these companies, but everybody has to use them. I mean, you can't get anything done without using them.
Unless you make your own search engine. You keep track of all the IPs of all the sites you're going.
Sure, you can't. Man, what do you have? Remember the search engines before Google, like Alta Vista, how useless it was trying to find anything? That's where you'd be. I mean, it's expensive to do all that work, and Google has the engine to make all the money to do it. So, I don't know. Anyway, DuckDuckGo is out there as sort of a protest site, but I'm not impressed. So Windows Telemetry. What is Windows Telemetry?
So that kind of tells you what's going on with a program if it fails. And it sends data back to Microsoft. And people were really upset about all this telemetry data being sent back to Microsoft when Windows 10 first came out. And people were screaming, oh no, my privacy, don't tread on me. And of course it
So diagnostics, is this like a Windows XP thing that pops up? Please tell Microsoft about this problem.
Yep, exactly. But for Windows 10.
Okay.
It supposedly also like keeps track of like what you're doing kind of, and so it can, improve their products and stuff.
But only when you launch it, or does it go on automatically?
Automatically, as long as you enable it, which is enabled by default in the settings.
Oh,
Which is why people were complaining about it when Windows 10 first launched. Supposedly all this stuff is anonymous, and supposedly it does have, legitimate purposes. So I'm not going to jump into that debate right now. What I do want to look at is how the service can be exploited to gain privilege escalation. And the way this works, and there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible, is that the service writes to the Windows temp directory. And it writes these little XML files to the temp directory where any user has write privileges.
Oh.
And so what you can do is essentially just make your own files and edit the files that are there to essentially gain privilege escalation in Windows using the controversial telemetry services.
So it's another race condition.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And we're going to see that in the next article I brought up too, which is actually something I found a long time ago. I didn't realize it was a CVE. I just thought, well, of course, that'll lead to root privileges. But apparently a lot of stuff that I thought was just okay, like of course it's there. Of course you can use that to get root is apparently a CVE and a major vulnerability. I really need to start submitting some CVEs.
You totally do. I mean, you keep finding these 0 days and you don't get credit for them. Well, of course, I don't know if it matters because you've already got this lucrative job at the telegraph agency. But anyway, yeah.
Has this? I wonder if this has been an issue all along, because Windows has had this feature for
forever.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been an issue. I don't see why it wouldn't have been an issue the entire time. Like I said, like that's what I'm saying. Like, of course, you can, if you have a service writing to the temp directory and you race in there and you edit the file and you can get up to root and stuff like that, and or at least up to the level that the telemetry service is running at.
I'm totally vindicated on a many years old argument that I had with a colleague about how it was not paranoid of me to disable the reporting feature.
Well,
yeah.
I also think privilege escalations are a dime a dozen. They come up in Linux every 3 months. I think there are hundreds in Windows. They just never bother to patch. They don't take them very seriously.
Yeah.
But certainly they're useful for pen testers. Remember the step, how to get up to root. You're supposed to get good at that because it's not impossible at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the one I liked was Windows XP Home Edition. All you had to do was open a command prompt and type at 12 o'clock, open CMD, and then you just got up to system. That was fun. Anyway.
Yeah.
So this I thought was very interesting. The Fuchsia operating system is an alternative to Android, and it is, among other things, very secure. And I learned a lot reading this. There are even more security features. So this is the monolithic kernel of almost all modern operating systems. Your users run, but everything's really done in the kernel, including the network staffs and the USB drivers, and everything is all in the kernel. And this is actually not that great an idea for security. So this is the microkernel. All that junk is out here, the USB driver, the network driver, and everything. And you have a very small kernel that runs with high privileges, and everything's in user land. So when you infect like the USB driver, you don't immediately get kernel access. And I was very impressed by this Zircon thing and this operating system, Fuchsia, because it has a lot of controls. There's this process isolation process, and it has a bunch of security controls that I didn't know about. It has address-based layout randomization and data execution prevention and safe stack, which prevents buffer overflows by having 2 kinds of stack. There's one stack just for all the pointers, which is completely separate from the other stack where all the data goes that might have an overflow, which is pretty brilliant. And they claim it has no perceptible performance penalty. And it means you can no longer overflow and hit the instruction pointer. It has a shadow call stack and an auto var init, which is kind of brilliant, which automatically initializes every variable you use, even if you forgot to. So you cannot have information leak. Like one of the big flaws in Windows XP was every time you have an exception, the EBP contains an address which overcomes ASLR. So you can find code. And this automatically fixes that. Anyway, I thought it was very interesting. And the other thing, which is pretty great, is it's mixed in several languages. Fuchsia is part of it is written in C++, but a lot of it is written in Rust or other languages that are memory safe. So this really seems like a real next generation operating system that incorporates a lot of new good security features. And so he tried to attack it, and he found that there are a couple little attacks, but all the attacks are mitigated really fast. Like you can exploit the USB driver, but you don't really get anywhere. All you get is control of the USB. You can't get out of the sandbox and take over something else. And pretty much all of them goes. The Bluetooth, silver stack, he found all these exploits. None of them are scary. There are so many layers of defenses in this clever operating system. I was very interested. So, you know, this is, I learned a lot. This will be going in like malware analysis and like exploit development classes as like the generation of improving things. And I have a little Rust CTF out there to try to learn Rust, because they're not kidding. Rust is a lot better. Almost all the techniques we've been using are not going to happen anymore when we shift to Rust. So one thing, by the way, though, is that Rust is really expensive, at least in its current incarnation. The Rust code is 10 times bigger. So this might be the sweet spot where you don't write the whole thing in Rust. You choose a few components to write in Rust that are the most risky. Anyway.
I'm also curious to see. I'm curious to see how the maintainability of Rust shakes out. Like, I can see how it's great for development purposes, but I'm curious to see how projects mature using Rust over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think they do studies and show like 90% of everybody wants to use Rust, but they can't because it doesn't. It's not yet ready for prime time. And I think, in fact, by the way, the Rust compiler I'm using, I think it compiles it to C. I mean, I don't know, but that's why I think everything's so big and slow. I think that Rust is not really ready for production yet, but everyone loves the ideas. Anyway, I'm watching this. I think this is the wave of the future. Anyway, and then, oh yeah, UCSF got hacked.
Yeah, so this was kind of a big story, big recent story here, and they paid out pretty. Yeah. The scammers had actually originally asked for more money than that. The BBC article is like super in depth. It even has images images of the chat bubbles that came up where they're haggling over the price and everything else. Because they'd originally demanded $3 million, and then they tried to pay them like $780,000 or $500,000 and something like that, and then they managed to agree on this this just over $1 million, and they paid it, and they got their data decrypted, so paid it in Bitcoin.
Man, what a terrible idea to pay the ransom, especially such a big ransom.
Right. And they had a negotiator working on this and everything. So it must have been some pretty good data that they had, in addition to just the student records, because as we know, colleges don't care about students. But
this is medical data.
Yeah, well, it sounded like what they really wanted was research data that was encrypted and not backed up. So they really wanted to get their hands back on this research data, which, you know, they do some pretty leading edge research, medical research at UCSF. So
they have a backup system.
That blows my mind. And I thought back to, taking your CISP prep class a few years ago when you were talking about how these companies just decide that it's cheaper to pay their ransomware than to pay for the backups. And, you know, I've got to think that at some point it's not cheaper to keep paying their ransomware.
That's what I'm saying.
I know. I mean, maybe there should be a law that it constitutes like malpractice to not have backups. I mean, come on.
You'd especially think for like important research data that maybe cost a whole lot of money and time to maybe even lives to generate, that they would at least back it up. But I guess,
I mean, at least you could
say, hey, go run to Staples, go get a USB drive.
Yeah. Well, and I mean,
much more complicated than that.
This is I think though, this is a good indicator that it's not just happening. It's not just happening at UCSF. This is happening at research institutions all over the world.
Well, I'm sure it is. And this is why everyone uses the cloud like I do. And then you have to think about backups. But I mean, I would think one simple solution would be to just say, for research grants, you can't get a grant unless you have some reasonable technical measures in place to like back up stuff. We're not going to give you grant money if you're not going to back up your stuff. That kind
Right. And I mean, you know, they say in these articles, they're like, oh, well, you know, you can't secure a whole university environment. It's really challenging. Well, okay, just proceed with the idea that you're going to get hacked and, you know, secure it as best you can, but at least back up your stuff so you're not beholden to these cyber criminals.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's exposing a real problem. It's amazing. I thought UCSF would be on top of it. And I think it's fair to say that means probably no one's on top of it.
Exactly, because I know some people that work in their IT department. They have a lot of very smart people. They have a really big, well-developed IT department, but it's not enough.
Yeah. Well, we clearly need to raise the bar. And this reminds me of 10 years ago, after the big hack of Google by China. I went to the conferences with management people, and they said, to stop advanced persistent threats, we're going to have to do all this stuff. We're going to have to monitor the network, have an incident response, and other stuff. And I said, that's impossible. That will never happen. And now that has really happened. We have really changed our whole philosophy about protecting networks to where this is now a standard process to have network monitoring and instant response and layers of defenses and a zero trust model. And so we also need to grow up and say, all right, I know you want to have like 10 different cloud services and 50 servers everywhere, but you really have to back it all up. And you have to have some restoration procedure that can really restore from the backups. And I realize you want to just hire an Amazon machine, put the company data on and have it up by tomorrow, but that's really not enough. You also have to have some backup and restore plan for it. And really,
and I mean, at some point we got to stop paying these ransoms. I mean, the British government's official position on this is don't pay the ransoms because there's no guarantee they're going to actually decrypt your data, or that this will ever stop. And I mean, I think that they're in a hard position in this place where, especially with a research institution where maybe that data is, you know, like I said, it was unique and maybe it was very costly to generate, et cetera, which is just even more of an indicator that they need to protect their sensitive assets like that. One thing I did like about this was that, you know, the way that this story was published and the way that the details were released were done in such a way that it gives us a really good post-mortem of what happened, and hopefully other institutions will, you know, learn from this experience ahead of time and put measures in place to avoid it happening.
I see a business opportunity here. Somebody could just develop a good backup solution, and you could make a pile of money saying, pay us some reasonable amount of money, and we really will back up all your stuff. And everyone ought to have regular tests of their restoration. So restore really works.
Yep.
Right. But it's a hard problem to solve. Like you said, it's not just as simple as, you know, going to grab a USB drive and backing it up. Though I think that one way that we could improve this is to start teaching, you know, we need to approach this just like we do with corporations, where security is every responsibility. And I don't care if you're an elite medical researcher, doctor, you know, it's also on you to back up your own data. And we need to start building this into every layer of the process where, you know, everybody just starts making it a habit, like of following basic security practices.
Yeah.
Well, I think one place to put it would be compliance. I mean, I think it already is in most compliance standards, backing up your stuff and restoring it, or you don't have sufficient compliance. And if you're not compliant, then you're not eligible for grants and business partnerships and stuff. You know, I think that's one place to put it. I'm surprised it's not already there. Anyway, so Europe has got IoT provisions.
Yeah, they're embracing some standards. And if you scroll down to the bottom, it's kind of what items they have in mind and what measures that they're listing in the standard.
No default passwords. That would be nice. These are pretty good ideas. Do they have anything about backups? Maybe that's this personal data. I don't know.
You know what I
Well,
kind of started reading.
I like the examine system telemetry data. That's a good one.
examine system telemetry. I wonder what that means.
Well,
How to detect if it's got hacked?
well, no, I mean, you're, say, for example, you've got a wearable or say, even better example would be a connected car. You want to see how the data that shows your location is being transmitted and stored to the back end.
So I found the provision for telemetry. If telemetry data is collected from consumer IoT devices, such as measurement data, it should be examined for security anomalies.
Yeah, because somebody could theoretically determine your location or position based on that data.
Well, you're thinking about securing the telemetry data, but that's not what they're saying. This is network security monitoring. This is hopefully noticing if something has been hacked by the telemetry.
Right.
This
is not telemetry, including log data, is for security eval and allows unusual circumstances to be identified.
But now that you mention it, I'm not seeing encrypt your network traffic anywhere. Maybe that's this, communicate securely.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this is not a bad thing. It's more or less the OWASP top 10. That does seem like a pretty good idea. Well, of course, what I'm afraid is this is probably not enforceable because these are vague enough that you could argue.
Right. Oh, that communicates security is cryptography.
Yeah. Well, I mean, however, the general idea, I must agree, and this is one thing I never seem to hear more about is this cyber UL listing that Mudge was going to make. For the last 10 years, he was going to make some kind of official statement of this product is secure, that you can put on your box and sell it, and companies can say we meet the standard or something. And it never seems to happen. But we really need it to happen.
Oh, in that same provision of communicate securely, I just found that they're making exceptions for ARP, DHCP, DNS, ICMP, and NTP.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem. There's a bunch of insecure protocols built into things. That's I think what always happens. You make a rule that sounds good, and then in practice, it turns out to be really hard to actually obey it and to prove you're obeying it, and to prove that what you're doing is good enough or not good enough.
I mean, it's something better than nothing, but you're right.
Well, that's why we have issues like PCI compliance, where we have human auditors examining you and sort of giving you a bill of health, sort of like going to court and defending your actions before a jury.
Yeah.
I mean, how hard would it be to create, like, I mean, I'm always confused whenever I block stuff with my network ad blocker. I'm always a bit confused. Like, I know that the companies really want me to see their ads, and they're willing to do anything to make to bypass that and try to get around it. And it seems so easy. What you do is you have the you have a DNS request to a legitimate server, like www.megacorp.com or something, and then on that server you have an HTTPS page that just does DNS queries. And then you can just run the DNS queries like through the website or whatever. It's basically, DNS over HTTPS. And you have that data, and you pull it back, and you can totally get around all that stuff and encrypt the DNS traffic that you're using, because you would assume that all the devices go to this megacorp.com thing. But if they're going to other sites, you wouldn't know about it. It would be so easy to do some sort of like hacked encryption like that, but everyone's like, oh, well, DNS isn't encrypted. Well, okay, it's over. Hands up in the air. We give up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not quite sure what you mean. You mean you'd connect to a website and it would be like a VPN pushing other people's data through their web server?
Right, through a secure connection. So at the very least, you would prevent people who are looking at your device from seeing outgoing DNS requests.
I mean, you could just put the ads on your page, and then they're not coming from any other site.
Or you could do that too, right? But assuming you have to do some sort of DNS, you have to get IPs back to the device. I mean, the example I'm using is because I know that the advertisers just really want to get around these, devices that are like blocking ads and stuff. And so I'm just saying that it's possible and rather trivial to get around it. And no one seems to do it because it's not a standard. It's not the way of doing it. And
what I would do is I would offer advertisers, you could pay a low rate and have the ad load directly from your server, or you could pay a higher rate and I'll put it on my page so they can't block it.
Right.
That would be the free market solution.
You could do that too, but Yeah, I mean, it seems that hardware manufacturers aren't thinking outside the box in order to get the security that they need. If the protocol itself doesn't support out of the box, then oh well, DNS is a lost cause. We can't secure the outbound stuff, and there are ways to get around that, and that's kind of depressing. But oh well.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, I'm really glad to see again Europe leading the way here.
Yeah,
it's certainly a good idea to start having some rules. And this one, Mac OS privilege escalation.
Yeah, once again, this is kind of no, you're not kidding me. So Mac OS, so here's the thing: when I'm hacking computers, one of the most useful tools, of course, is the installer. You want to get back into Windows, you throw in the installer. You want to do something with Mac OS, you use the installer. Oh my gosh, like I've done like complete computer forensics using nothing but the Mac OS recovery partition. I mean, these things are just a hacker's dream. And so I'm surprised once again at that this is an actual CVE, because of course you can do this. If you are running an installer as root, mind you, you can overwrite some of the files that it puts in the temp directory.
This is literally like my homework assignment, only worth 5 points of a race condition.
Yes,
this is incredibly trivial.
It is incredibly trivial, and it's like no duh. Of course you can do this, and but it's apparently a CVE, and I once again I'm just like, why are these CV? Like I must have, and a bunch of people I know too must be sitting on like a bunch of CVEs just because they're just like, oh no, duh, of course, like no one's going to consider this a CVE because of course you can edit the temp files in an installer that's already running as root and get some sort of privilege escalation.
Apparently this is so common that in system D, every process has its own temp file. Apparently everybody's just throwing crap in the temp files and trusting it, and they've given up like telling you not to do it, and they've just made your own private temp folder for every process.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, I thought this is one of the many things that like Kaz got so upset when he looked at my code. He said, oh my God, I was just throwing junk in the temp files and reading it later and just like an idiot because I didn't care. It was one of the many things I said, I know you're not supposed to do this, but it's the fastest way to get things done. And apparently everybody else is still just doing it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as having everything be 777. Oh, sure, then I don't have to worry about which process is accessing it or anything. It's surprising how sleazy people are. I thought I was just being an idiot and other people were doing better, but I guess.
I remember seeing this, some programmer put a thing on Twitter, which I liked a lot because it explains programming so well, and it gets to an issue that's near and dear to my heart, in which there's this quote from, famous quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, where this commander of the Navy says, "You are the worst pirate I've ever heard of," and Jack Sparrow says, "Well, you've heard of me."
That's right.
And this programmer says, replaces the text and says, "This is the worst code I've ever seen run." And the programmer says, "Yes, but it runs."
Yeah, the reason why I did it is I think the same reason everyone did it. I'm like, 2 hours till class. Can I make it work in 2 hours? Well, yes, I can, as long as you ignore all the other obstacles and just do the fastest thing to make it work regardless of consequences.
Yes.
I think it's everywhere.
Yeah. No, and people are way too critical about other people's codes. I mean, there's one of the things that really kept me out of programming initially is that there were all these people who thought that there is a right way to code and you have to do this. And if you are not using Java at the time, if you're not using Java with proper oriented, programming, things and your codes or if you have a function that's more than 1 page long, oh, that's you're just a terrible coder and you should just quit immediately. And I that kind of attitude just I couldn't stand it. And
that's the no pun. I don't mean to make a pun, but I'm gonna make a terrible pun. Those are the form over function people.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think the basic lesson in all of security is there's not one size fits all. There are places where you just have rapid prototyping and make something fast, and then there's another place where you actually should like polish it and do it right. And it's not like one is going to happen and the other isn't going to happen. You need to choose where to invest your time and effort into
And
securing things.
the ironic and funny thing is, at least for me in my experience in the software industry, is that the ones who do it right are such a minuscule minority that they're almost non-existent.
Right.
I think you need those people, and you put them on the critical process to bring it up to standards. And you also have like the Facebook move fast and break things people that make the prototypes of new things.
Oh, I just meant companies that do it right. Usually, most corporate code bases that I've seen are just like a nightmare of brittle code that's been kludged together over the years with fixes just hastily applied, and the whole thing's just this sort of brittle monolith.
It breaks.
Yeah, held together with duct tape and prayers and promises.
Yeah, and in my own little web ecosystem is very much the same. Like every now and then, it hasn't happened in about a year, I'd like destroy one of my servers and lose everything and have to rewrite it. And I'd say, it comes out better, really. And you kind of need to like just burn it down and rebuild it every now and then.
Like Airbnb, out of all the corporate ones, Airbnb's been the one that seems most anal about form in coding. Which I get it.
It violates the whole economic principle of innovation. I mean, if you have some rules written 10 years ago and everything has to be done that way, you're going to go broke because you need to have the new stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, so see, I got in the last one. Oh, not that one. Oh, this one. Yeah, this. So Mongo, I've been hearing about this for 10 years. Mongo tells you, do not connect it to the internet because Mongo installs with no password by default, but a bunch of people do. And there was like a unicorn project and other projects that would scan the internet and find all these Mongo databases. And so this guy just hacked them all, cleaned them off, and 23,000 of them. And he wants each one of them to pay like a ransom. So every one of them now has, all your data is backed up. You must pay 0.015 Bitcoins in 48 hours to get it back. So this is like a brutal solution. So thousands of Mongo databases have been wiped out this way. So we'll see what happens.
Huh.
Lord knows. But I don't know why they make Mongo default without a password. It seems like just putting in the instructions, don't connect it to the internet, is not really enough.
Because, rapid prototyping and get it out the door quickly. We'll deal with it later.
I've heard Mongo is so popular. A couple of years ago, they said, if you want a job, if you can spell Mongo, they'll hire you. If you can do anything in Mongo. So they had a CTF where you hack into Mongo, and I'd never done it. And in fact, if you just query like how to hack into Mongo, it's pretty easy. It's pretty simple. It's sort of like Git. There's just a few commands, and in like half an hour, you can figure out how to do a few things in Mongo. So I guess it's really fast or something. People love it.
Well, I mean, it automatically outputs to JSON as opposed to regular SQL kind of queries, and I guess that jives well with web development.
Yeah,
it does. I've done a lot of Mongo projects, and I mean, SQL is great for some things, and for other things, you don't really need a relational database, So
I found SQL to be too much bother. I just use a flat text file for everything.
Which is really funny considering the fact that you used to be a database architect, but like I'm the same way. Like, I can't be bothered to build a website, even though I used to build them for money.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I remember when I first got my first job at City College, they gave me a computer, and it was this horrible old broken thing that took like 10 minutes to boot up and then would like crash, and the clock was stuck at 1975 and stuff. And one of my students came into my office and he said, I see you using that computer. It reminds me of my cousin who drives a car with no battery. And he said, the reason you use that computer is because you can,
Mm-hmm.
I could use this old broken piece of junk. It's good enough because I understand the computer,
Right.
Yeah, that's why, when I took my web design class, the teacher said the best web designer knows all the advanced tricks and then does not use them. Anyway, so mid-air collision. Yeah, did they actually have?
So this is interesting to me. It's something that I've brought up before in the past on stories, just because it's an area of fascination for me. And this research paper came out recently that's pretty interesting. It's well, kind of dense, but worth a read through on the study that these guys did on how it's possible to affect and manipulate these TCAS systems, or traffic control avoidance systems for planes. And, they fell just short of having a working proof of concept, but only because, the suspicion is that Python was just too slow for what they were trying to do. But they came pretty damn close. And really, what's interesting is that I think it would be fairly trivial for them to, they didn't even try to optimize the code or anything. I think it would be fairly trivial to do that. Also, they talked about possibly using FPGAs or other hardware boosts to accomplish this. And this is one of those things where at first I thought, well, this is going to be yet another nothing burger. But then the more I started reading into it, I'm like, oh, they're really kind of on the precipice of making this actually work. And you need some specialized conditions and some tools to do it, but not a lot. You need a really good laptop and maybe $600-700 worth of SDR equipment to make it happen.
So the protocol in planes is not secure enough, apparently.
No, it is not secure enough, and we really need to start considering this now, especially, as cheap hardware, cheaper hardware becomes readily available, and we're able to optimize for speed and stuff like that. We really need to consider these things in the design of these systems.
Is it because it's old? Is it like a couple decades old or something?
It's because they were never designed with security in mind, like so many systems. It was just never considered as a possible attack vector. So they just never bothered to even consider that when they were designing the systems.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of medical devices where they never thought about getting hacked, and now they're having to think about it.
Exactly. And I mean, I think it's pretty funny the lengths that we'll go to for security theater with stuff like the TSA and all that. But, then there are other pretty glaring issues that aren't addressed. So
Yeah.
hopefully this area of research will continue and the manufacturers will take notice at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, of course.
Hopefully that point is before a passenger aircraft.
Yeah, before death.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to pay any attention to this for the next 3 to 5 years, because 90% of people are not getting on a plane. I'm sure not. So their big problem is just all of them going broke. They're firing everybody. They're shutting down the airlines. I mean, airlines, hotels, restaurants, movie theaters, they're all toast.
Yeah, but we still have a lot of cargo jets going. And believe it or not, people are still getting on planes. It blew my mind. And in fact, there were 2 airlines that announced during the last week that they were going to start booking their flights to full capacity, like filling up the middle seats and everything, which really surprised me.
And somebody told me Wild West Hacking Fest is having a face-to-face security con like this month.
They are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Kind of ironic that it's held in a town called Deadwood.
Yeah. and then Malware Jake, he said like 2 months ago on the internet, he said, well, no one's going to see me until like 2022. I'm hiding out here. And then he said last week, hey, someone invited me to a face-to-face conference. Do you think I can go? And everybody said, no, hell no, no, absolutely not. Are you out of your mind? That's what I said. I said, what the hell? They couldn't make me go to like a conference. Are you crazy? I mean, if there's one lesson from the last 3 months, it's that our government and no other part of our economy has any idea what they're doing. They change the rules every month. It's very clear that
I mean,
nobody knows what's going on and you should hide.
if they go back to in-person teaching, none of my campuses are gonna be, none of my classes are gonna be on campus because
I know.
I don't think it's right to put students in that position.
Or teachers, and it's totally not going to happen. They're just lying. They're listening to like Fox News and believing complete lies. If they opened up the college within a week, there'd be a positive case and they just have to close it again. Like,
Right.
how stupid are you?
But like you said, they're probably banking on that exact scenario happening so that they can still collect tuition.
Yeah, but City College is free. So I don't know what they're smoking. I mean, the expensive private colleges have a reason to swindle people. City College does not.
Plus, even expensive private colleges, I could see how you could make this work on a campus of 300 to 400 people. But we had upwards of 50,000 students enrolled last year, so it's like totally insane.
You can't even do it with 300 or 400 people unless you can actually like force them to never go home and never go out to a movie theater or a bar.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. I know of a couple campuses where they're doing it in person, but you're just not allowed to leave, even for breaks or anything.
But I think the only people that can do that is like Jerry Falwell's Christian University. I mean, you're like a military base then. How many students would actually obey those rules, even if you passed them?
There's a lot of schools that are doing that in the flyover states. One of my old schools is doing it.
They're telling you you can't ever leave campus. We'll have armed guards and dogs.
Yes, and if you leave, then you're gonna have to finish out the semester doing it online. And I'm like, well, if you're gonna make that rule, why not just make it online anyway? But
boy, I wonder. That's like.
But one thing that's interesting about this is I've been doing a little informal poll of students both at our school and in other schools. And one of the reasons I've come to one of my conclusions is that one of the reasons that students are so upset with the shift to online instruction and want to be back in person is because the online instruction is crap. One thing that really surprised me was both at our school, but also at expensive private schools. Sam, you and I are in the vast minority by doing live and or interactive lectures. Most of the instructors aren't doing that at all. And so the students have no engagement or way to talk to their instructors, and they're like, well, I couldn't focus or get into any of my classes. And I asked, well, how many of your instructors actually held live class each week? And they said none of them.
What are they doing? Just putting up a textbook or something?
Yeah. And it's like, well, no wonder it's failing because you're not actually doing it like it's your job. You're not actually trying to hold class online and keep it as normal as possible. You're just.
But I thought this is the whole point of Zoom. I mean.
So I had the opposite problem. Yeah. During the spring semester.
Really?
All my classes are always live, whether it's online or on site.
Uh-huh.
And when we switched over, I had like 1 or 2 students who showed up.
Wow.
And everybody else did not show up, but yet they still had that same problem of I'm confused, I'm lost. And I'm like, there's a live session every week.
Right.
Same time that it would have been if it was on site. You're not showing up. Why is that my fault?
I had people showing up, and I even had my intro NetSet class wanted me to give 3-hour lectures every week. So I did, even though sometimes I felt like I was going on for 3 hours about super basic stuff, but they loved it and they wanted to. I had a good, I was having at least 30 people show up, which is pretty good for online attendance every week and asking questions. So I kept doing it.
Well, the important thing is to meet their needs, but I think it's what I've gotten used to. Very few of them do want to attend live when I have it, but the ones that need help should do it. One thing I have realized from going to the teachers training at City College is you have to think about the really helpless students who are like deers in the headlights that don't really know why they're in this class or what the point is. Somebody like my parents told me I had to take this course or something. And they just need like to be sort of poked and prodded and encouraged. So they require you to have a meaningful interaction with them every week. And so then you'd actually notice you didn't come to class. You should come to class next week. What's the problem? So I'm trying to implement something like that. by outsourcing it, of course. There's no way I'm going to remember to do that, but there's they kind of have a point. There is a group of students who don't know why they're there. They're not motivated. They don't really want to learn it, and you have to sort of like prod them along and guide them. And
I did a lot of that. But it is time consuming.
it is. That's why I'm planning to outsource it to a compliance officer.
There you go.
I know, it's the same thing. You need to fill out this report. You need to like get it in by this date. You're late. Why are you late? There's a need for some of that. And it's not what I'm good at, but I think I can arrange for it to be present in my classes by outsourcing it.
But the other thing too, I don't know, Irvin, if you taped your, if you recorded your videos or not.
Yep.
But when I started going back to school as an adult, I was working 2 jobs, and sometimes I started taking Sam's classes, and sometimes I couldn't make the actual class because I'd get caught up with my second job. And it was really nice to be able to just, if I was driving in the car or something, just throw those YouTube videos on and be able to listen to them while I was sitting in traffic, or watch them while I'm doing chores like folding laundry or something. So I think sometimes students will watch them later too, even if they don't show up for the live portion.
Well, that's certainly what my students do all the time. I mean, I have trouble getting enough of them to do the Cahoots. I think 3/4 of my students just watch the videos later, which is me. As long as you learn it somehow, that's all I care about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. Well, all right. I guess I'm going to stop it unless there are any more remarks. All right. Good.